Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host, as always, Professor Prime. And today, we're going to talk about voice acting. And I'm going to have an absolute blast, if you couldn't already tell. It's going to be so much fun for me, and I hope it's fun for you too. So, let's talk about math and voice acting. All right, so when it comes to voice acting, there are so many different components to it, and it's utterly insane, and there's just so much math involved in it. And I don't think that a lot of people will necessarily, put the two together, but can't have voice acting without the math. And I think that's pretty interesting. So when you're talking about voice acting can be used to do a lot, right? Because you could be doing voiceovers on a commercial or a documentary. You could be doing, a comedy show. You could be doing voice acting in an animated series, whether it be a cartoon or an anime. You could be doing voice acting in live action. You could be doing voice acting when you're talking about narration. You could be doing voice acting in video games. There are so many different mediums that you could be voice acting in, and it's pretty cool. And there's a lot of math in all of that. So let's get into it a little further. When I think of voice acting, and I think about how talented you have to be with it, I think just how cool it is, and I start thinking about the math involved. Um, to start, let's talk about sound for a second, right? I could actually do a whole video on math and sound, and I may just in the future because it's definitely on my list. I don't know if we'll get to everything on that list because it keeps on growing, but it's there. But I digress. So, when it comes to sound, right, it's fundamentally bonkers to me because you're just talking about vibrations going through the air or going through different mediums that we assign context to, right? That we assign meaning to. We have these waves that get processed and they can convey information. Right now, you are listening to me. And I am talking to you in a very deliberate and specific way. It's measured. I might not be writing down all of the math, but it's there. And you're hearing my sounds, and it means something to you. And even if you didn't speak my particular language, or you couldn't hear, I do have subtitles on the YouTube video. So you'd be able to, in theory, get something out of that. And you could get something out of the meaning. And so I think it's cool that all of that is connected. And to go further into sound, right? We have so many different languages, so many different words, and so many different meanings involved in all of this, right? And I think it's interesting because not long ago I did a video on math and language barriers, and I think that holds up with voice acting because you can do translations, you can do localizations of material, right? You could do dubs as far as voice acting is concerned, and that's really popular in the anime world as well as video games. But what I think is interesting about all that is, it's not just, over here in the States, because we're used to subs and dubs and all that good stuff, and we don't necessarily think about other countries doing the same. But other countries dub out material too, and it's just interesting to see how that all connects, because we're hearing these words, and that's one thing, and but there might be some words that don't translate language to language, and there might be cultural things involved, right? Where something just might not make sense to you culturally. And so I think that's where it's important to really get logistics worked out. Because when it comes to voice acting, there are a lot of logistics. So if we focus on what I'm talking about right now, not only, sorry, let me start that over. So let's take a dub. Dragon Ball is one of my favorite franchises of all time. So if you're thinking about how that all works, if you're going from Japanese to English, they have to have teams for that, right? And in the beginning, there was a lot of sketchiness during the original Dragon Ball Z dubs. they were still like great because it's hard to ruin Dragon Ball Z, but like there was a lot of meaning sometimes, like changed deliberately or changed unintentionally. So having a good sense of logistics is important, and they have gotten a lot better over the years with that sort of stuff, like especially like Funimation. They handle a lot of dubs, and they've gotten a lot better. And they have teams that like will take what's written and translate that. So they have to take a script, they have to translate that script. I don't know if they're giving the translations these days or not, but as far as I could tell, no. But I'm sure they're working more with different companies to get out more accurate dubs. But my whole point is, you can have a dub, you can have a team, and they can take time to write that script and translate and have people there who are good at what they do. And there's a lot of math and all of that. And then when you get to the voice acting stage, the voice actors have to do a lot. They have to choose how they're going to say something. And when it comes to sound, there's just so much involved, right? Like you have to consider frequency, amplitude, pitch, tone, all that good stuff. And now they might not be writing out this and that, but they're doing a lot of math and all the physics that's involved in voice acting. And they might be doing something like consciously without writing it down, but they might also be doing some stuff unconsciously. And I think that's all interesting because, again, there's a lot of math and all that, right? There's a lot of physics when you're dealing with voice acting because you're dealing with sound. And when you're talking about like, doing dubs, there's also this issue of the voice actor not just saying the words, but saying them in a certain way so that their words match the mouth flaps. So there's a lot of math in matching a voice to a character, or getting the syllables just right. And so writing the script, you got to be careful with that too. So there's a lot of math in like counting and matching and doing all that cool stuff. And I think that's awesome. And then like things have to be animated a certain way too. And I think it's all cool how it lines up because a lot of times, by the time we're seeing an animated product in general, like not even counting dubs, like these things tend to be worked out years in advance because there's a lot of precision involved. There's a lot of math involved, and getting things just right is key. And it's interesting to me because we enjoy this content and that content, and we don't necessarily consider how precise things have to be, and that's fascinating to me. And I'm a big fan of voice acting, and what some things what some things may convey, because right, like if you're like a voice actor, right, like you're making certain decisions and you're working with people who will help those decisions or inform those decisions, and you have to decide how you want to say something. And right, in the voice acting world, there's room for all types, right? Because you could have something that's more casual in its nature, but you could have something that's a little bit more extreme, right? And you can have someone who maybe they need to be more consistent in their role, maybe that fits their character, and they have to kind of talk in a monotone, or they're just regularly consistent without necessarily getting into monotone. But they might have to go from emotion to emotion. And there's a lot of math in that, whether you realize it or not, when you're altering your voice, because you could be altering the volume, you could be altering any number of the things that we talked about to get to the voice, and you could be doing it on the fly. You could be doing very, very quick math, and I think that's interesting. Because if I have to talk like I'm talking to you right now, that's one thing. But what if I wanted to convey that I'm happy? Right? What if I wanted to convey that I am really excited about what I'm doing? Then some things change. There are certain, audio cues that indicate excitement, that indicate happiness. And what if I wanted to talk about being angry? Then, right, my voice would tend to lower. I don't necessarily have to get loud about it, although sometimes that helps. But I have to convey my anger. And again, this varies character to character, because what if you have a character that's angry, and you want to convey that they're angry, but maybe they do it in an unconventional way. Maybe it's enough to talk slightly deeper, and maybe the word choice is key. And I think that's interesting. And there's just so much that you could do, and it's just crazy to me. And then you got to figure, right? You could be voice acting, and there could be music involved. And there's a lot of math in that music and how it's constructed and how it fits into this program or this scene. And then coordinating that with, Um, coordinating this like music with the voice, it takes a lot. And then like if you're coordinating the voice with the music and also sound effects and also making sure everything lines up visually, you have to be so precise. And there's math in that. There's math in how it all fits up. And right, you only have a certain amount of time that you're doing a scene or a program and making sure everything lines up and has the right timing. And you might want to do certain takes and put some things together. Or you might have situations where someone voiced a character or they were voicing this or that and they're replaced. You might have someone who brings their own style to it, but you might have someone where they're trying to slide them in. And so then you have to have someone that is so profoundly good at what they do that they have to match that other voice without you necessarily knowing. And if they're so slick, you'll never know unless you like look it up. And that's crazy to me. But no matter how you cut it, there's a lot of math in that. And I think that's fascinating to me. And then, what if you're listening to something and you don't know the language, but you have the subtitles, so you can know what's going on, like through the words, but you could still get something out of the voices because again, there are certain audio cues that indicate certain emotions, so you can still get something out of it. And I think it's fascinating. And I just like I start to think about all the different voice actors out there and how skilled they are, with changing their voice and just doing all these different characters. And it's just wild to me because again, there's so much math in that change. And it's wild to me because you have to consider volume, you have to consider tone, you have to consider so many different elements in terms of how sound works. And I think about some of the voice actors that I've known over time. I could not tell you every single voice actor that I know, but I'm definitely going to mention several because I think about Jennifer Hale, I think about Phil Lamarr, I think about uh, James Earl Jones, I think about Gray DeLisle, known as Great Griffin in some circles. I think about Nolan North, Troy Baker. I think about Katey Segal. I think about Billy West. I think about John DiMaggio. There's a lot of people, and everyone that I mentioned is American so far, but there's still so many people out there that are amazing that I don't know or I don't know by name. And when I think about people like outside of American voice actors that are just like top notch, I think about Masako Nozawa, the voice of Goku in Goku Relatives and Duplicates. She does a really good job, and I think it's interesting because through her voice acting, even if you don't know exactly what she's saying, and there's a joke in there about like saying and saying, um, but even if you don't know what she's saying, you get a lot of her emotions, and if you listen carefully enough, like she voices each of those characters somewhat differently, and I think you definitely notice some big differences between like when she's voicing Goku and Goku Black in Super, and I think that's interesting. But my whole thing is just like you can get her emotions, you can get like the subtle differences in what she wants to get across. You can get across the major differences, and I think that's all fascinating, and just how all of it works. And then, like with, I'm trying to think if there was anything else. One of the other big things is equipment, right? Because you want to have the right recording equipment. You want to be very very careful, and there's math and how all that equipment works in terms of like amplifying your sound and getting the right sound, and there's also math in how it affects your sound, so you want to be careful. That being said, I've said it several times in this video, but like when it comes to voice acting, like precision is key, and like we enjoy so many different things where we don't necessarily know right off the bat that they're very complicated, that there's so much precision involved, and I think voice acting is just an amazing field. And I know I enjoy it in anime, I enjoy it in video games, I enjoy it with narration, I enjoy it in all the different ways that it's out there. And it's really cool because voice actors are incredibly hardworking. Some people think that you just go and show up in a booth and that's it, and it's like it's not. It's more complicated than that. It's more nuanced than that. So I have a lot of respect for voice actors. And I know, like, in gaming, it's such a fascinating thing for me because, like, I grew up, before voice acting in gaming was a thing. So I grew up on Nintendo, like, NES and, like, SNES. And I grew up on Sega, the Genesis. I grew up on a Sega Genesis, with that being my first system. And I would go to, like, my cousins, and they had the Genesis as well, but they also had, like, the NES and the SNES. And, I also had Game Boy. And so, back then with all those systems, they didn't really have voice acting like that. But then you go into the era of, like, PlayStation and N64, and you get voice acting. But it's not always in all the games, right? Just like in Final Fantasy VII, for instance, it wasn't there. Same with 8, same with 9. But then you get to the era like PlayStation 2, Dreamcast, GameCube, Xbox, and it is way more mainstream. Final Fantasy X was the first game where voice acting was a thing. And honestly, there are parts of it that's questionable in the English dub of that. But it's an impressive feat no matter how you cut it. So, yeah, voice acting is awesome. It's really cool. And if someone has to, like, change, like, their emotions bit to bit, or they have to start singing, or, they start like rapping or something, then they have to, like, do the math involved in singing and the math involved in rapping. And that's really cool. And for me, and I threw this in, like, I think in a few videos here, but I really do like how math is used in rap, because, like, rap has made me better at math, and math has made me better at rap, right? Because there's the flow, there's the rhythm, and it's really cool. And with that, there's a lot of flow and there's a lot of rhythm in singing as well, and voice acting too. When you put all those together, it's amazing. And some people can just switch between any of those things on the fly, and it's utterly insane. Utterly insane. 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 All right, I'm tired and I'm getting carried away. So while I'm here, I'd like to say, like, I do change how I want to do things in a video. Sometimes, like, how I want to say this or how I want to say that, but for the most part, I have a certain idea of how I want to speak and how loud I have to talk to make sure things come up clearly. And I am not necessarily writing down the calculations, but I'm doing the math. And when you're speaking to someone, you're doing the math too, whether you realize it or not. And that's awesome. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Same prime time, same prime channel. Professor Rhyme out.